Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the JKWD podcast. We got a good one for you today, but first, on the other side of this microphone is a computer, and on the other end of that computer is Calvin P. Ringgold Sr. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, because that microphone was getting dang uncomfortable. I got to tell you that. Life is good, man. We got a little snow here. It was 9 degrees when I woke up this morning.
Woo!
There you go. And it's probably 10 now. Who knows? It's been a few hours, but life's good. And it snowed a little bit, but the air is clean. So hey, what more can you ask for? Clean, cool air.
Sweet.
That's right. We can bypass the whole partridge in the pear tree thing. So anyway, life is good. I got nothing to complain about.
Well, your pear trees are not growing at 9 degrees, so the partridge has no place to sit.
Either, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Actually, it might bamboo, and you'll get the reference when you listen to the rest of the podcast. That stuff grows everywhere. Once it's in, man, it's in. They actually, here in Savannah was one of the first places they brought bamboo to see if it would grow here, and yeah, there's a botanical garden, a little west of town that was the first test site where they tried to grow a few different kinds of bamboo. None of the giant bamboo that we're talking about, but it turns out that if you accidentally transplant it somewhere, it's going to grow there too. It's going to grow all over, and
just give it.
Some of the businesses found that out when like when strip malls went up, and they got some planters. They're like, oh, that bamboo's pretty. Maybe bring a little of that over, and all of a sudden it was everywhere.
Gotcha. Well, live and learn.
Yep. Live and learn, and let it be too late to take the lesson from it sometimes. We're brought to you today by Vitamin K Daily, philosophical supplements for your attitude health. Hey, I did it right.
You did.
Get yourself 4 weeks free if you go to vitaminkdaily.com and sign up now. After that, just $24.95 a year, but you can wake up every day, Monday through Friday, with just a little dose of how awesome the day is going to go in your inbox. It's assuming you wake up at a reasonable hour, because they do go out at 3:30 a.m. So sometimes I'm actually sometimes I'm actually awake when tomorrow's comes.
Yeah,
happens on occasion. I know that I'm up too late if that happens, though.
That's okay. Sometimes I'm up when that happens, and I'm up too late then too.
So, Vitamin K showed up. I better go to bed.
Absolutely. So we got.
So anyway, that's vitaminkdaily.com. Get yourself 4 weeks free. And now we can talk a little bit about our guest today. Go ahead. I think
we should do that.
Yeah.
There's a really cool guest today.
Yeah,
Kandace Willie. Great conversation.
Yeah, Kandace Willie is a can I say ball of awesome? Is that an insult?
It's okay with me.
Okay, hopefully it's okay with her. She was a teen mom, and when she got divorced at 19 with 2 kids, her becoming ex-husband told her that she'd be nothing but a welfare mama, and now she's now she's gone past the top sales thing at a national retailer, and is now teaching the next wave of top sellers, and she's also a resilience coach in her spare time, which I guess COVID has allowed for a little extra, but we talk about resilience. We talk, everybody came up too. We talked about Tony Robbins and Fred Astaire and Stephen Covey, and we got all over the place.
You get far enough through, you're going to learn a new word too.
Yeah. That's true. Yep. We talked about bamboo.
Wait for that. Dogs, you'll recognize it when you hear it.
Some other stuff too. Yeah. So go ahead and give it a listen. We'll play some music, and on the other side, you'll hear Kandace Willie.
Podcast, where we talk about better humanhood and teach you how to dominate your world. You ready? Here we go.
Awesome.
So how are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Good.
Crazy
work
Friday.
We finding you like locked down hard wherever you are.
Yeah, so we're in Salt Lake, and not too bad. I would share that as you look across the country, this is one of those areas that really hasn't had much impact. So we actually were never fully quarantined. Obviously, pieces like masks and whatnot are in place, but nothing too drastic. But we
managed to escape that.
We did. So I'm from Utah, and we moved back here about 2 years ago. We were in Chicago for almost 4 years, and happy to be back home. But I look at Chicago, and I'm happy that I'm not there.
Yeah, good time to be where you are instead of back there. Yep.
Yes,
100%.
I don't think I want to be in Chicago for anything.
Definitely not right
there.
now. It is very cold there. Yes. We managed to be there for the polar vortex that occurred, but a few months later we were out. I mean, it's interesting to see what negative 26 is.
Yeah.
In a brick house.
It's
cold.
It's cold. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cold.
I was in Fairbanks, Alaska for back when I was in the Air Force.
Oh,
and it would get like 60 below there. I was there in March. It's crazy. And I'm like, okay, we never need to go back here again as long as we live, not in the winter anytime.
Ever again. My son's in the military. He's shared a few places they've been. So
what branch?
So he is a scout sniper in the Marines. He instructs. He's in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
He's in the Marines. I didn't do that because I didn't think I'd make it through basic training, to tell you the
You're like, the Marines. Yeah.
I had a couple of friends that went to the Marine Corps. I'm like, I'm gonna go with the Air Force. I like that blue outfit they got. Yeah.
And I want to fly. Yep. So, interesting. So I would share that with you because, my son has guns. So just be careful. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. No problem. I'm not going to tell you where I am in the country, just to let you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, don't share. Don't share at all. That's not the point of these discussions. But yeah, where are you guys at?
I'm in Savannah, Georgia.
Awesome.
I'm in Syracuse, New York. It was 9 degrees when I got up this morning. So.
I was just going to say, you can't say Chicago's cold. It's cold there too.
Yeah, but Chicago got that crazy wind too. That's crazy.
The lake effect.
The lake's closer. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I learned that one of those long puffy coats that everybody wears in the Northeast that I swore I would never have. I think within like 2 weeks, I was, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Girl. I was like, I'm getting one of those long things, those sleeping bag things with fur on it. So, yeah. I totally understand.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on your show.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Normally what we do is we start by asking you to introduce yourself to our audience and then tell us your mission and why it's your mission.
Awesome. So I am Kandace Van Heel, and known on social media as well as my podcast is Kandace Willie, which is my first and middle name. Mm-hmm. And I would share with you guys that my mission since launching my own podcast or my own efforts on social media really is around utilizing my superpower, which is resilience and helping people overcome adversity. I was a teenage mom and a single mom for a lot of years. And, I was that person hell-bent on proving everybody wrong and want to help others in similar circumstances find their way and find success, which for me equates to happiness.
Awesome. How did you come about this? I mean, obviously you found yourself in, a tough spot young, but how do you work your way out of it and stick with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would share that I had my daughter at 15 before I could even drive, and was married by the time that I was almost 17. And I would share that by 19, with 2 young children, I was going through a divorce. And for me, it really came from, the catalyst for me was the night I received my divorce papers, and sitting in my 1-bedroom apartment with my beautiful children, with my daughter in my bed asleep, and my infant son in the borrowed bassinet, really looking at the 2 of them and going, I have absolutely no damn idea what this is going to look like, but I am going to do the very best I can. And that really was the catalyst for me, is it really became about them. And I know everybody today talks about their why. Before I really knew what that meant, they were my why.
Ooh. Great. Did you, we were just talking about this actually before you show up. Did you have proof of resilience, proof of success before you set about making your way then?
I think that, listening to my mom speak about my personality when I was younger, I was that child that you told me no, and I would figure out a way to do it. So I would say that, yes, that resilience was to some degree innate. My mom used to actually say, you're like a cat, no matter how high you drop you from, you land on your feet. So I'm cat-like. Didn't know that about me, but I would share that, yes, I do think that there are some pieces of that are personality based for sure. What do you think?
What? Who's going first?
Go ahead.
Chicken.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Resiliency is an interesting art in science. I don't know if I'm as good at being resilient as I am not letting it get to me in the first place. I'm not bragging about this, and I don't know that I've had what I would consider to be really incredible hardships. But then again, some of the stuff I've been through, I've seen other people just dry up and blow away with. So, part of that mindset is I go kind of neutral. I don't do this a lot,
Yeah.
But
I call that positive intelligence.
Let me write that down. I like that.
I call
positive
that
intelligence, positively. I'm good at helping other people sometimes when they allow me to see that maybe it's not quite as bad as you think it is.
Right.
But I've known people who have come from incredible hardships and come up and this all of a sudden they're bouncing around the world and life is good. And I'm like, how did you do that? I don't know that I could do that. So in one regard, I am so happy that I have not actually been tested, not to the full extent that the universe can test you. Maybe I did that in another life and they figured out I passed that time. So I'm okay
with that off the life list.
Yeah, I'm good for that. How about you, Josh?
So the way my mom tells the story is growing up, if I rolled in mud, I'd come out clean. Well, my younger brother could go in the bath and come out dirty. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. So, well, I was, generally lucky and things came easy to me. He had to work for everything. And, I found that I had problems when I got to college and actually had to do the work because, school was easy for me. Extracurriculars were easy for me. Standardized tests were easy for me. So I cruised through, 17 and a half years. And then my brother, meanwhile, had to work for everything. He's dyslexic. He, had to, reading was a struggle for him. But he's now off. He's teaching college. He's scoring films. He's taken a master's because the college said, hey, you're teaching, you can go too. Why not?
Yeah.
And so he's really worked for what he's got, and now he's really excelling. As an adult, I had to start manufacturing adversity for myself. Become a distance runner and that kind of thing. So I've had to set myself up with occasions where I could fail, so that I can I can work to succeed at them.
Yeah, it's that adversity piece, right?
Yeah.
Like it's how do you see past it and how do you keep working? My son was very much like you in school, and in the sense that it came easy to him. And, it's interesting because I think that he chose military life. I'm like, for somebody who was in his own right mind, like in control of school and all the things that impacted him, and if things were easier, it's interesting that he chose military, because I don't think those two are married up.
No. In fact,
you never know.
Yeah. Yep.
You never know.
Yeah, I really had to not do something. I don't take orders well.
Yeah.
You don't even take suggestions well.
No, I do not.
I
still don't know how he and I work together. I really don't.
I think that's fantastic. And when I think about, the other thing that what you guys are talking about makes me think about is attachment. Because I think that's the other piece of being resilient, is your ability to let go.
Yes.
Is your identity, have you connected your identity to a relationship or a job or something that's materialistic that you can't let go of, that's holding you back? And I do think that's another skill that I haven't attached myself. Matter of fact, my greatest opportunity is being present, because I'm always forward thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, I don't look back. So I think there's a piece of attachment that goes with resilience.
How's your presence? I mean, you talked about looking forward and not looking back. How are you with staying now and being here? Are you constantly thinking about what's next, or are you able to kind of hang in there?
So my daughter went through, and as Calvin, you were sharing the piece around hardships, right? And the things that you go through and that cause you to pause in life and really reconsider. I would tell you, I was not aware that I wasn't present and that I was so forward thinking until my daughter went through a severe addiction. And, I ended up in a place where I ended up with clinical depression, didn't even know. I literally was in denial. I'm like, I'm not depressed, and then cried, right? Because I had lost my mom and my daughter, grieving my daughter that was still alive, but obviously going through the severe addiction. And it put me in a place where it was like, the cognitive doctor basically said, you can either get some counseling, B, practice some mindfulness, or C, work with the counselor to medicate. And based off my daughter's situation, medication was not something that was even an option for me. And I started with a counselor, and the counselor advised me on yoga and meditation. Started with meditation. And really, that's when I recognized that I wasn't present. And today, a few years later, I have a regular practice where I meditate every single day. And I do yoga 5 to 7 days a week. So I am doing much better, but it is something I fight constantly.
What does your meditation practice look like?
So I have an Empower Hour every morning. So first of all, I split my phones. And what I mean by that is I have a personal phone and I have a work phone. And that was my first part of my being able to connect or disconnect from being pulled into things that distract me. So I wouldn't get up in the morning and look immediately at my work phone and see email and become reactive. So my Empower Hour, I get up, I don't look at email, I get my tea, and I go up to my meditation space, and it's a minimum of 10 minutes to 30 minutes before I start my day. I journal with some intentions of what do I want to accomplish today. And then, visualization is huge for me. So I obviously, my journal, actually, I do a lot of clipping from Pinterest so I can envision the things that I'm working towards. And again, not long, far out things that I'm working towards, but more immediate. And then during the day, I would tell you that I am that person that will stand up from my desk, shut things off, and make sure I'm breathing, because that's the other part for me is if I get stressed, I stop breathing. So, or I
stop breathing.
I hold my breath.
Wow.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that one.
Yeah, don't do that. Not unless you have someone around that can check on you.
No. Oh, interesting. I did notice that I breathe very slow and shallowly. I was looking at that the other day. Everybody's like, breathe in, and I'm like, no, I don't do that. My breath is there. I know it's there, I'm feeling it, but it's like I have no reason to like supercharge to jump off a building or something. So I'm still alive, so I guess I'm doing all right.
Great. Well, and you can tell where your stress sits in your body too, based off of it. So we all tend to tense in our shoulders, and some of that will tell you if you're breathing deeply, still breathing, I should say.
So now that we know that resilience is your superpower, how did you figure that out?
So I think I've always known, and that goes back to just being prideful and driven. I would share with you that going back to when, as I shared with you before, going back to that being at 19 years old and recognizing that I had to live a different life than most 19-year-old girls or women would have to live with 2 children, an infant and a 4-year-old, is I just was so determined initially to prove people wrong. So I think my resilience started there. I think the Fred Astaire quote is, the greatest revenge is outrageous success. And that used to kind of play in my head. It's like, I will prove, my ex-husband, last thing he said to me as he packed his last box out of the house is, "You'll always and forever be a welfare mama." And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. So I think, some of it was pride and ego. So I think I've always known, but I think what I thought it was that was driving me at that time, I didn't necessarily have a word for, and have recognized over the years that when those obstacles are in place, I would also share, I'm a person that I am more challenged in those situations, and I like the mental stimulation of having to problem solve. So I think those two go together. So very young, no screaming.
I just called Josh.
So my niece is 5 years old, and they diagnosed her with something that is usually diagnosed in teenagers. It's called oppositional defiant disorder.
I might have had that.
That's the. It sounds a lot like what you have. I know my initial reaction to, "Hey, you should," is no. That's the nice version. And it sounds like that's a thing in your life. The worst thing somebody can tell you is that you're going to fail or that you shouldn't do something, because.
Because that's not my vocabulary. Yeah. Yep. And would fight it to tooth and nail.
So how did you end up transitioning to coaching?
So I would share. So in my day job, I work for Ulta Beauty, and I am a director of field training and education. So I was an operator for years. I was a district manager for almost 25 years. So I'm very stimulated by making money and telling people what to do. And now I teach people how to make money and tell people what to do. So I think for me, people have always, I realized early on what you can accomplish with others, and with that and being a leader of a business, even though it wasn't my own business, I always was problem solving, coaching, leading, and 25 years of that under my belt prior to stepping into this HR role that I've been in for now 4 years. So I do it in my day job, and I want to continue to do that in a different format outside of work, because I think at work it's all leadership and it's all operations and processes, and it isn't where I get to come out, talk about my daughter's addiction. It isn't where I get to talk about being a mom at 15 or going through divorces or things that we know go on outside of work that directly correlate with what's happening at work. I also think that I spend a lot of time around helping people try to understand that your values at work and your values personally shouldn't be different. So they really should align. And I think a lot of people spend their entire lives or adult lives fighting that internal battle of how do you bring those together.
How did you find the transition to teaching?
So I want everybody to be their best, because first of all, we're all our best when we're happy. And and it doesn't mean, I truly believe you have to have the ebb and flow of good and bad in your life to recognize when you are happy or when you've accomplished joy or those things that make you feel good. So, I think for me, it was truly trying to help people achieve that for themselves. I've also, because I didn't want to be judged early on. I mean, there were people that were like, a girl, 2 kids, like, I don't judge people. I look at them and go, I want you to be the very best version of you, not version of me or anybody else, but version of you. So it came pretty natural because of that piece.
Yeah, that's a big change from I'm going to do this and prove people wrong and tell people what to do, to stepping back and really letting it be about your students and outside of work and in more of a coaching environment about your clients instead of about you.
Well, and I think the other piece too is we all go through that pivotal time in our lives where it becomes less about money. So,
right.
I think that also certainly would lend to it. Cause I mean, that 19-year-old girl, $1 more an hour meant being able to pay for my, my own daycare or rent or, to come off of those programs that assisted me in helping elevate me. So then it was about money. And then I think that, to your point, that transitional piece also probably occurred a bit when I was like, okay, I'm at a financially stable place that now it can be because I love it and I am passionate about it versus it being about my finances.
I got to eat next week. Yeah. Maslow is alive and well in life.
Yeah.
What would you, I don't know, goofy questions. What would you imagine is whether you want to talk about your coaching life or your whole resiliency practice would be to date, your greatest win?
My greatest win above all else is just being okay with me. So if it's, when you're that person that lives out in front, if it's no matter what you're working towards, I am so happy and truly grateful for where I'm at right now, that all those other things are awesome. And, if I accomplish them, fantastic, but it's just being happy and good where I am. If it's my physical state, and honestly, if it's my weight, how I look, if it's my job, if it's what other people think of me, my relationship with my husband or my relationship with my kids, I think the thing I'm most proud of and relish the most in is I'm just okay now.
And at what point in your life did you connect with that?
It is when I found mindfulness. So there was a direct correlation between.
Okay, true enough.
Because again, I think that, and the other piece too is I think life as a whole, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, right? Like life's just demanding, and we're being pulled in so many directions. If it's kids, work, we get caught up in the action of things. So I think it's that pause to go, am I being purposeful in what I'm doing? And am I eliminating all the other crap, like all the things that don't matter? So, and not letting that control me.
That's eliminating the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's a magical skill. And I know a lot of people who like everything matters. So from all the stuff, I mean, I've listened to the stuff that's happening in your life. You're probably going to say mindfulness again, but how did you get to the point, and this is for the audience, where you decided what really mattered?
Yeah. So the reason that's such a fantastic question is because I think the mindfulness helped me get there. But what really mattered to me is recognizing when I lost my mom or lost my daughter, which she's back 2 years of sobriety. Yay. But it was 6 years. It was 6 years that she went through her battle, but started with opioid use. But I would share with you the two things in those two losses that made me recognize it is my mom and I did not always have a great relationship. And I was just disappointed that by the time we did, I had wasted all of that time. And with my daughter, my daughter is the girl I didn't like in high school. And what I mean by that is she's very dramatified. And she, she would call me and I'd be at work and she'd start to tell me this story. And I'd be like, oh my God, can you bottom line me? Like, I'm working, like, give me the bottom. And what I realized is if I did that, she started over, which was never a good thing. But 6 years, but honestly, 6 years into her addiction, I'm like, I want that call and I want to listen. And once I worked through all the emotion of my role in her addiction, I was able to get to my only regret in any of it or piece I wish I could have changed was when I had the chance to spend time with her or more meaningful time with her. That I'm all hi dog. Sorry guys.
I got the same thing going on over here.
You got a dog.
Okay, sorry. I'm like in the middle of my answer. So I wasn't spending the time with her that I wish I had. And I always told myself, if she gets clean and I get a chance to do this over, that I know doesn't mean she won't relapse, doesn't mean she won't use again, but I will be present and I will be a part of her life. So those two situations made me think about every interaction, every commitment that I've had and where my personal values and professional values would line up.
Where did you identify your personal and professional values? Is there a specific exercise you've done? How did you evaluate that and those?
So I would share that there is a book out there called Water the Bamboo. And it's Water the Bamboo by Greg Bell. And he also has, such an excellent author and speaker. I would tell you that I went through I was in a meeting and that was shared as a recommendation, and I watched his TED Talk and was hooked, bought the book, and he takes you through an exercise to really identify how you marry those two up. So that was really the resource and tool that I used for that.
That's awesome. I only heard that bamboo story analogy probably month and a half ago. And I was like, how could I possibly be as old as I am teaching motivation and self mastery and not have heard that story? I
haven't heard that story, and I'm guessing there are members of our audience who might not. Do you two?
Oh, well, please
tag team it. Go for it.
Take care of it. No, you got it. Go ahead. Tell us the bamboo story.
So, giant bamboo, it takes actually 2 years. So Greg speaks to to focusing on what matters most and how do you truly cultivate that. And he uses the example of the bamboo. So giant bamboo, obviously once you plant it, it takes 2 to 3 years to grow to the surface.
Okay.
And it really is about being patient and how the farmers utilize that land prior to it achieving, obviously, its harvest. And then it can grow up, to, I think it was 60 to 80 feet within just days of obviously hitting the surface. So it's that really whole notion of being patient as the seed is growing. Once it hits the surface, how it blossoms into something quickly.
I'm gonna have to get me a picture of giant bamboos just to keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's and again, great book. Multiple exercises in the book in terms of how you bring it into life. And the other piece I appreciate about his book is it's not just finding it yourself, it's how to integrate it into your life. So how do you integrate it into the philosophy that you have in your marriage or with your family or your work team? And really, how do you get everybody that you surround yourself with in alignment with those pieces, but also being, cognizant of the elements that are important to them at the same time. So I would also say that adds a ton of value.
And so it's really an analogy that aligns with 10 years to overnight success. That it seems like you came from nowhere, but you've been working so hard that on stuff that nobody saw, and then all of a sudden you're everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Very, very aligned with that.
As your career, your day job, has progressed, have you found that the shifts you have to make there also shift in not only your coaching, but your personal life?
Yes. What I value about you asking this question is, I took my team through an exercise a couple of years ago, and I pulled it off of the internet as I was searching for icebreakers. And, the exercise really is where it's like a life career map. And if you look and you literally said, okay, here's the line in the middle, and I'm going to chart the highs and lows of my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's, had a hard time in personal life, went through a divorce, moved out, doing better, lost weight, went up, and then did the exact same thing with a separate line and graphed how you obviously progress through your career. Or what's happening in your work. And it's very interesting to see where the sweet spot, because the places where the lines meet up are where we find that greatest sense of joy in our lives. So, we're always, and I know people talk about work-life balance. There's no such thing. I mean, the truth is there's times when work requires more, your personal life requires less, or vice versa. But when you talk about that true sense of happiness or success, it was pretty amazing, not just for myself, but everyone on my team, where you found that, like, oh my gosh, my life, it's that crossroad of my life is in a good place right now, and so is my professional life. But recognizing also how you behave or how you're impacted when they're offset.
That's a
great exercise.
That's a deep exercise. I need to do that one for sure. You use a word on your website that tickles me in one regard and kind of excites me in another. And you use the word succelerate.
Yep. My word's accelerate. So to me, acceleration really is where you're taking and you're motivated by achieving that success and ultimately how you put that into action. So it really is that combination of what are you trying to achieve in success, and then and really having it all the way. I also think we tend to think I'm going to be happy when I get over here, or I'm going to find success when I'm over there. And I think the part and the beauty of acceleration or accelerate is that we are already there. And when we have that synergy or that energy within us, it makes it just, you move so much quicker and faster and with more fulfillment. So I'm glad you like that word. I like that.
I like that word a lot. Yeah. If I use it, I'll reference. I'll give you credit for it. Right?
10 years from now, I'll see it somewhere, right?
Well, no, maybe as early as next week. You never know.
That's true. I'm waiting.
I give credit where it's due. That's, one of the things I've always loved to do in my life is when somebody does something to make sure that they know who did it, who said it, where I got it from, because I've been in so many situations where people just like to steal ideas and pawn it off as theirs. And I'm like, no, if I learn this from this guy, he needs to get the props, or this lady, or this military fellow. And I love, one of the things, I love giving credit. I love finding stuff I can tell people about that other people are doing. So it's wonderful. So I love giving credit. Like I tell him, he keeps me straight. He gets me to give him my permission. And then the first time he needs to use that, he'll ask me if it's okay. And after that, he just rolls his eyes. And then sometimes I have to turn him off.
Turn him off.
Turn off the Josh washer today. Yeah. But it's good.
So speaking of giving credit, you've overcome some hurdles, not only emotional ones, but financial ones. And sounds like you didn't have a great relationship with your mom for a while. First husband, not so good a model. How did you model your climb into success? Where did you pull your examples from? Who did you learn from along the way?
Yeah. So I would share that really my learnings came from three different places. One, I thank my mom and my dad for, I do feel like they were great examples in the sense of they worked hard. I think my work ethic certainly comes from them. 100%. I also think that they gifted me with common sense, which I'm very thankful for, because I think that, I was aware of what was coming at me, because I think, I obviously, being a teenage mom and I mean, I took my daughter to school with me, education or a formal education at that time in my life was not an option. I leaned heavily into reading resources. So we didn't obviously have the internet back then. I took my kids to the library. I read, if it was getting a, how to complete a resume for dummies book, I did. So I really leaned into resources, knowing that it was something that I could learn. But I would say the third and probably the most impressionable above all else was modeling the behavior of my mentors. And, I do feel like I read people fairly easy. And I do think that was helpful for me because I could see those individuals pretty quickly who I needed to emulate or wanted to get on their coattail. And that really obviously helped me move quickly, especially in my professional career. I was a district manager at 24 years old. And I mean, at 24, I wouldn't have given my keys to my car to my kids. So I'm like, or my checkbook, it's like, and I was they gave me the opportunity to run multi-million-dollar businesses at 24 without a formal education. And did I work hard for that? Absolutely. And was I willing to go up and beyond, which is that work ethic that I got from my parents? But I learned quickly and I observed. So mentors, find your mentor.
So did you find your mentors mainly in your work then?
Yes.
Within your company? Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I would say within my company and the written word, I mean, that's the other piece with my kids that I'm very proud of. They read to this day. I couldn't afford to do much. So our vacations or our entertainment they still love to read. We would read together. So that was our entertainment.
What are maybe 3 books that that really shaped the best parts of you?
So when I go back, and it's an oldie but a goodie, but Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits, I would absolutely say to this day, I still recommend the book. It is such a fundamental piece of who I am. So absolutely utilize that as a leadership book. I think Kenneth Blanchard is another author, and there's so many of his books that The Heart of a Leader is an excellent book that's out there that actually pulls in a bunch of the scenarios that he's utilized from that come from other books. So he was a author that I certainly referenced quite a bit. And then I would say probably more personally, relationship oriented, or even spiritually. I love Oprah. Her favorite book of mine today is where she pulled in, What I Know for Sure is actually the title. And if you follow her at all in all of her magazines or articles that she's done over the years, that was kind of her thing, What I Know for Sure. And this book actually pulls all of those philosophies together. So, she's at the core, probably that person that I connect to heart, so there's authors that you connect to mind, and she is absolutely the person I connect to from a heart perspective.
She's been through
A lot. And she's just so incredibly relatable. And, I that's what I love about, I loved about her show back when she had her show, all the books. And today, even her own channel, and Super Soul Sunday, I just appreciate that she's a person, and I've never seen her as a person with ego.
So you're teaching resilience. Have you ever almost quit? You were right there. I'm not doing this crap anymore, whatever that was. Tell us about that point and coming out of it.
Yeah. So that is such an honest. So when I think about that moment for me, that raw moment for me where you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I know exactly when it was, because it was in 2007. I had accepted a job that required me to relocate. And I was so excited. I'm like, this is going to be such a great opportunity. It was moving me from Denver to Los Angeles. And, I had earlier that year about a year prior, had purchased a townhome. And if you guys remember, 2007 was when the economy bottomed out, specifically in housing. Yep. I had purchased a loft in Denver that made me house poor. Was a terrible financial decision. But I had gone through a divorce. I was going to show the world that I could rebound from my divorce. I was going to have this awesome place in Denver. Bought a new car that, again, I couldn't afford. And, I was on top of the world in this job and thinking I'm taking a new job, and I relocated, and my relocation package allowed me for 30 days of housing in California. And then obviously they supported like a realtor to help you try to sell your house. Well, I couldn't sell my house or the loft. And there was about 6 months I was robbing Peter to pay Paul, because I couldn't afford to live in Los Angeles and pay rent where I was at, and then pay a mortgage in Denver as the housing economy was falling apart. And my realtor's suggesting short sale. We still couldn't sell it. There was a lot of new real estate nearby. And again, just people couldn't qualify for loans that they creatively had qualified previously. With that, it put me in a position of foreclosure. And with all of the juggling of my finances, if it was, I would take and pay this credit card so I could pay the house payment on the credit card, just trying to keep my head above water, I was financially drowning. And I had worked so incredibly hard to build my credit, to be financially stable, that moment of like losing what I considered to be everything that mattered, that goes back to that attachment piece. I was devastated. I was like, I literally had a moment where it's like, is this even worth it? Like, and it had me questioning my job, my career. It's like, I had to end up, I actually ended up not only foreclosing, but I had to file bankruptcy because of it. Of course, going back that at that point in time, that was awful for me. And to me kind of defined who I was as a person. And working past that moment and not just getting through it, but that was probably the closest that I've ever come to just feeling like, you know what, life's just not worth this. And I don't know if I can keep doing this. It's a great question.
Thank you. But you did.
I was going to say the follow-up was how did you, how did you decide to keep going?
I made a new plan. So I would share that I ended up actually leaving the job in California, and I ended up moving back home to Utah and pursued a different professional opportunity, but allowed me to be near family and a support system that made it easier for me I didn't move back in with my parents, but moved to Salt Lake, where I had obviously my parents to help support with my kids. I would say that was probably the biggest piece is obviously having a support system helps, but also not being afraid to say, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and letting it go. So it was disappointing to have to walk away from the job opportunity, but it was the right thing for me to do to get back on my feet.
Yeah, we've had conversations from time to time on when is it quitting and when is it you've just decided that this is not the best option for you and you need to move on. That's one of Josh's great questions on podcasts. And a lot of people don't know how to make that determination. Mm-hmm. When was it just a bad idea, or when is it I'm being lazy, I'm not confident with me, I'm just not going to put myself through this anymore. How do you help people make that kind of choice?
Yeah.
Analogy.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you guys are asking or having this conversation quite a bit right now, because I think what COVID or current state has led us to is a lot of people that are in this position, right? If it's their job situation, or honestly even being isolated away from people and not finding the things that normally bring us happiness. So, I think that's where you have to, and this is where that intersection of understanding professionally and personally what's most important, and this is how we kind of keep our self-reserve in place, is recognizing that no matter what you decide, you still have you. And, the decisions aren't going to be easy to make. It's understanding your pros and cons. It's like, I don't think there's ever a perfectly right answer for any of us, but it truly is sitting down and self-reflecting enough to say, this is what's important to me. This isn't what's important to me. And if I do this, what's the win? And then what's the opportunity? And trying to make a decision based off of the best scenario, knowing that neither one of them may not be ideal, or even the third option may not be ideal. So it's just giving yourself the grace to know you have options. And that's the gift right there, is that you have an option.
Thank you.
You guys are really making me think here.
He's got that. What am I going to say next? Well, no, I think this is the first time that we've actually maybe the second time we've actually interviewed anyone who was, admittedly a resilience coach. I think, I don't know if they're hard to find or not. Maybe I'm just not looking, and maybe I don't need that because I know enough about me, but resilience is people's entire self-images are tied up in the resilience piece. And, should I be able to recover from this? Should I be able to recover from that? Am I just a loser? And going through those things with people, I mean, it's tense. Mm-hmm. And, as a coach, you never tell them, of course. That's not the job to tell them. They have to bring out this answer from inside them. And that's a challenging place to be in life. So I don't know if I could ask you what your toughest case was. That's probably a weird kind of thing, but I was going to ask you your best advice, but I think you just gave it to it. You got to know yourself. People getting to know themselves is tough.
Yeah, it is really tough. And, it's interesting because you kind of spawned a thought for me when you said, like, who's been your toughest person to help or influence or guide? And ultimately it all resides with us, but I'll tell you, the hardest person for me to influence has been my daughter. And, I just like the pause when you said that, because I'm like, I get so frustrated because I'm like, man, I could help her. She'd just let me, and she won't. So much of helping people is them letting you help them. And, I do think that when somebody seeks advice, if it's that you're just asking because you're a friend or you respect someone's opinion, or you're hiring somebody to help you, or however you're approaching it, it's first that willingness to ask for help and being vulnerable. I've never been a person to say I have all the answers, because I certainly don't, never will. Am I going to make mistakes? Absolutely. And the beauty of it is I know I'll survive at the end of it, based off of what I've gone through. But my daughter, I get frustrated all the time because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I just wish she would let me help her. She won't. I'm like the one person that I'm on the outside for her. So even though we're closer than we've probably ever been, and, she's gone through so much, and I'm so proud of her and what she's been able to work through, she just won't let me in.
A parent's place, just on the outside of the door.
Yeah, I find the older I get, the smarter my parents get.
Yep. That's a t-shirt. I think that's a t-shirt.
Don't let them hear that.
Sticker right back.
Well, we can't let them hear any of the podcast, Jess.
My dad was like, what's a podcast? I'm like, Dad, it's kind of like old sports, radio, sports talk radio. Yeah.
But for computers. No. Oh, God. Oh, awesome.
So speaking of podcasts, tell us about yours. Tell us not only about it, but why you decided to start it and that kind of thing. Because I think that's something that a lot of people are thinking about. So 10 months into COVID here.
So I would share with you that moving back to Chicago, or moving back to from Chicago, for me was the initial catalyst. So I used to volunteer with a few organizations there that helped single moms, young moms, a large organization called Dress for Success that really helps women, acclimate, or it's really more of get back into the working field with additional support. Moving back to Salt Lake, there's not a lot of those type of charities or organizations. Here, it tends to be a bit more church oriented, and that's just not my thing. So my daughter's like, Mom, I don't know why that disappoints you. You could, there's the internet. There's so many other ways that you can reach people across the country, or across the, all the way across the world if you want to. And so it really, she sparked my willingness, because I was not a big social media person. And so that piece was huge for me. And I stepped out first on social media, which was a lot to learn initially. And then I've always listened to audiobooks and podcasts, so it's not new for me. I know a lot of people it's new, but I've always loved it. I listen to a lot. I mean, like a couple of my I love Tony Robbins too. He's another one that I would say through life has impacted me. But, listening to podcasts, and I'm like, and of course, my husband and I are both home. I normally travel in my job about 80% of the time, and I haven't been on an airplane since early March last year.
Wow.
So being home for me, not just physically in my house, but just not traveling is a big change for me. Having more time on my hands, and my husband having a background of music and audio, I'm like, we should do a podcast. So it started with that socialization piece and then morphed into, I had always said if I'd ever write a book, it would be called Leaving Nowhere. And the reason it would be called Leaving Nowhere is because of all those people in my life that thought, based on my circumstances, that I was going nowhere were wrong. So doesn't surprise you, I'm sure, after hearing my story.
So
but
is that out there? Do we have that to look for?
Yeah, it's out there. So Leaving Nowhere, not the book, but the podcast. And so it's Leaving Nowhere, all roads lead to success. And again, it's really that piece that, it's whatever you define success as, whatever makes you happy. And then recognizing that no matter what the adversity is that you have to overcome, you will find success through those learnings. May not feel like it at the time, recognizing that it didn't feel like it at the time for myself either, but really the long term of where that leads you. So that I really wasn't certain what it would look like, feel like, sound like. It was like, let's just go, as most of us do. When we start a podcast, and, I go back and forth between a couple of different types of episodes. So I have a very short bonus where it's like every week I give a motivational Monday tip, and I speak to a listener question or tip. So I'm sharing listener advice. Mm-hmm. Then I rotate between kind of a teachable, shorter episode where it's just solo with myself, teaching out a life skill. And then the longer episodes are more the interview based episodes where I'm bringing people that want to share their success stories. So that's where it's morphed into, and really the basis of it, or how I look at guests, or the kind of the criteria that I frame it up with, is on my website. So at CandaceWillie.com, on the podcast page, there's the 10 guiding principles for leaving nowhere. So those are really pieces that, had I written a book, I would have formulated the outline on. And those 10 guiding principles in no particular order are self-worth, vision, direction, values, choice, consequence, education, connection, and transition. So if I were to summarize how I was able to, looking back at all of those scenarios, there is something that I could tie in those situations to every single one of these 10 principles that helped me overcome it.
Well, there are your book chapters for the book.
There you go.
You already have that outlined, yeah?
Yep. Now I just got to get all the other stuff in it. Only problem is I'd rather talk about it than write it.
I see. Yeah, I hear you. Well, I'm told that, you can just get your podcasts digitized. I mean, so that
transcribed into
speech. That's the word. Transcribed. That one.
Yeah. Well, my only concern is I'm not sure my sarcasm would translate.
Well, then you have to use that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I say so many goofy things. I have to be careful because I probably live on the edge of annoying somebody every single day. However, they just have to take me being lovable as understanding that I'm not trying to do that to them.
No, absolutely. So there's a superpower in that, I'm sure.
I keep looking for it. We'll work that out.
Yep.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Well, is there anything that go ahead, Kelvin?
No, I was just going to steal your question. Go ahead.
Okay. Is there anything that you had hoped to talk about that we haven't gotten to?
No, you guys, this is great. You're good at what you do. I listened to some of your podcasts. I was like, I'm excited to talk to these guys. I like how genuine and authentic. And I was like, I can do this podcast. I'm ready. I just want to talk to these guys.
Awesome.
Because Rick asked, he's like, are you going to prepare? I'm like, nope. I'm just going to get on there and talk to them. So
awesome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we do our little bit of research to, make sure that, we understand a little bit about who you are and what you can talk about, but we don't sit here with a list of questions. So
No, I love
we
that.
we like having the conversation rather.
I tried that once. He wouldn't let me. No questions. I can't even write down seeds. We just have to listen. So the other thing in a podcast is I actually have to pay attention.
Yeah.
I got to pick out what to answer from. And he and I have different, he's way more the analytical.
Yes. Kelvin is the head. He stays in the clouds. I'm the feet. I stand around. We're good. We're very tall between us.
Yeah. I can see that dynamic, and it works for you. Yeah. No, it's good.
Balance it out.
Well, and, I'd share with you too, the other funny thing about podcasts, and, I had to hold back from not answering it this way because that's not where it originated. But I laugh a little bit about podcasts right now, because if I'm assuming now seeing you guys thinking about if you recall the 80s, which I my favorite era, favorite music, all that stuff.
Yeah, I recall the 50s and the 60s too.
It's like, nah. Nobody's counting. But my correlation, to the 80s is, if you remember in the 80s, it didn't matter who you asked. They were either in a band, starting a band, or were dating somebody in a band. And nowadays, when you bring up podcasts, it's like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, or I have a podcast, or I'm dating somebody who has a podcast. Yep. I'm like, I cannot, for one, I just can't tell people I have a podcast anymore, because they're like, oh, I'm starting a podcast too. I'm like, awesome. So I have flashbacks to the 80s. I'm like, well.
I hear you. Well, the nice thing about
and worst, here I am in my garage, just like everything.
Oh yeah. Well, the cool thing about a podcast, and I've talked to a number of people who wanted to do podcasts, and they weren't sure whether they wanted to do it. And I said that the nice thing about a podcast is the audience is yours.
Yes.
People are coming to that podcast for you. So you can believe when you get an audience, when you got a following, there are people who are genuinely interested in what you yourself have to say. So, you're not splitting it through some syndicate thing. People are coming up to hear you. And with data, you can figure out at least where they are, if not who. So
that's true. It's true. That's very true.
Even people with some of the strangest things to discuss can have a following, because they're out there.
You know what? It's so true. And I mean, I'm such a connector people wise. And, I love that people are doing it. And of course it's it is the future. It really is. People are invested in it. People want to tell their stories. People want to hear their stories. I think it's a fantastic thing. And again, touches everybody. We have one, and my husband always references, it's like, oh, good downloaded. Frenchie's got our download. Somebody in France listens to every episode.
There you go.
But, it does. It feels good that, and you bring up such a good point. It feels good that you're connecting to those people in your way, and they are coming for you. So I love that. Awesome, guys. Well, I thank you. And
very well.
Anything else you want to know? My favorite color? No, I'm just kidding.
Where do you hang out most on social? Where can people find you?
Instagram is where I tend to spend most of my time. So follow me on Instagram, Kandace Willie.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We will. It was a lot of fun.
I'm waiting for you guys to dominate and take over the world, guys. All right. I'll be here waiting for that bamboo string.
All right.
Hopefully we won't make you wait too long. If we do, it's probably my fault. So Josh will have to come out with that reminder thing.
I know. It's like, awesome, guys. Well, thank you again for having me. And you know what? Just wish you both much happiness and much success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll shoot you an email when this is up.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, guys. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. Show notes and more at jkwdpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends, and we will see you next week. Bye. a Better Humanhood production.